Every single person of Madagascar alive today is descended from just 30 women. Not 30,000, 30. Stay with this video till the end, because by the time it's over, you will understand how an entire nation of 30 million people was built from one boat that was never even supposed to survive the journey. Subscribe now, because this channel breaks down the DNA mysteries hiding inside the world's most misunderstood populations, and this one might be the strangest story we've ever covered. Madagascar sits just off the coast of Africa, 400 kilometers of open water between the island and the Mozambican shore. That gap is smaller than the distance between London and Paris. You have probably seen the shape on a map 100 times, tucked right against the continent, and your brain filed it the way it files most things that sit close together. Same place, same people, same story. Lemurs, baobabs, red earth, an African island. 30 million people live there today. Picture the satellite image. Africa on the left, Madagascar on the right, separated by a channel so narrow it barely reads as ocean. For most of history, nobody thought to question where the Malagasy people actually came from. The answer seemed to be sitting right there, 400 kilometers away. It was not. Here is the crack. The Malagasy language has almost nothing in common with any language spoken on the African continent. Not Swahili, not Bantu, nothing nearby. It belongs to the Austronesian language family, the same family as Hawaiian and Tagalog, and 90% of its core vocabulary matches a language spoken in the rainforests of Borneo, 8,000 kilometers away. 8,000 kilometers, not 400. So the real question was never, are the Malagasy African? It was narrower than that. Which population, out of hundreds scattered across island Southeast Asia, actually sent people across an entire ocean? In 2012, a geneticist named Murray Cox, at Massey University in New Zealand, set out to answer it. His team, publishing in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, sequenced mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed only from mother to child, in 266 Malagasy women. Then they compared it against 2,745 women from 12 island groups across the Indonesian archipelago. That is roughly 10 Indonesian samples for every one Malagasy sample. 4 years later, a second team, led by Nicholas Brucato and published in Molecular Biology and Evolution, went further. They ran genome-wide data, not just maternal lineage, across 551 individuals from 24 populations. Earlier attempts had pointed vaguely at Western Indonesia and stopped there, because nobody had ever properly sampled the specific groups living deep inside Borneo. This time, they had. To even ask the question properly, the researchers first had to widen it. Southeast Asia is not one culture, it is hundreds. Consider the Baho, sea nomads who spent entire lives on houseboats, never touching land, ferrying goods for the Srivijaya Empire across 1,000 kilometers of coastline. Consider the Ma'anyan, landlocked forest dwellers in the Barito River Valley of southern Borneo, speaking a language that would turn out to be the closest linguistic match to Malagasy on Earth. Consider the Mandar of Sulawesi, shipbuilders who designed the Sandeck, one of the fastest traditional sailing vessels ever built. Consider the Nias Islanders, isolated off Sumatra, carrying some of the oldest unmixed Austronesian bloodlines in the region, known for a ritual where young men leap over 2-meter stone columns. And consider the Igorot of northern Luzon, rice terrace engineers whose genetic profile is used by scientists as a proxy for what early Austronesians looked like before everyone else started mixing. 5 populations, 5 plausible answers, not one of them obvious. Given all that, there was an obvious guess. Crossing 8,000 kilometers of open ocean takes real maritime power, and the Srivijaya Empire had it, controlling Indian Ocean trade for 6 centuries with ships that could reportedly carry 500 people at once. Its trading network reached Borneo, the Philippines, and the coast of Africa. So the expectation was simple. The founders should be a seafaring people, someone with boats built for distance, someone plugged into that empire's trade routes. The Baho sea nomads, the Mandar shipbuilders, maybe traders sailing directly under the Srivijaya banner. A landlocked rainforest population with no ships at all was not supposed to be in the running. The elimination started with the population farthest from the target and worked inward. Taiwan went first. Taiwan is the original Austronesian homeland, the 5,500 years ago, where this entire language family began spreading outward, eventually reaching Madagascar in one direction and Easter Island in the other. It remains the widest single language dispersal in human history, but when researchers plotted Taiwanese Aboriginal genomes against Malagasy genomes, they landed nowhere near each other. Too many generations, too many intermediate populations, too much drift. Ancestral, but not the source. Gone. Next came the Igorot of northern Luzon, one of the least admixed Austronesian populations still living today, essentially a genetic snapshot of what early Austronesians looked like before everyone else started mixing with their neighbors. If anyone preserved a pure signal, it should have been them. Instead, their genetic component showed up in Malagasy DNA only faintly, diluted, present but never concentrated. A rice terrace building culture that carved mountainsides 2,000 years ago, and still not the match. Eliminated. Then Nias, the island off Sumatra where teenage boys still leap over 2-meter stone columns as a rite of passage, a tradition unbroken for centuries. Nias carries some of the deepest pre-Malay Austronesian bloodlines in the entire archipelago. Deep roots, though, are not the same as a direct line. Researchers measure shared ancestry using something called identity by descent, long stretches of DNA that two populations inherited from the same recent ancestor. Nias and Madagascar shared almost none of it, a striking culture, wrong island. The next candidate should have been the strongest one. The Baho, the sea nomads, spent their entire lives on houseboats, moving cargo and people across 1,000 kilometers of the Srivijaya Empire's trade network. If 8,000 kilometers of open ocean required serious maritime skill, this was the group built for it. Some Baho populations even carry an evolved adaptation for their lifestyle, enlarged spleens that let modern freedivers hold their breath for over 10 minutes underwater. Extraordinary sailors. But genome-wide data showed Baho communities are mosaics, shaped by intermarriage at every port they ever touched, too genetically scattered to cluster tightly with anyone. Eliminated, and this was the surprising one, the Mandar of Sulawesi came next, builders of the Sandeck, a double outrigger vessel still considered one of the fastest traditional sailing boats ever designed. Y chromosome data, tracking male lineage, had shown a real connection between Mandar men and Malagasy men, a promising signal. But once researchers looked at the full genome instead of one narrow paternal thread, that connection turned out to be secondary, a minor contributor rather than the source. Close, but not it. That left the Ma'anyan, and this was supposed to be the easy part. Their language is the closest match to Malagasy anywhere on Earth, 90% shared vocabulary, established as far back as 1951 by the linguist Otto Christian Dahl. If language pointed here, DNA should follow. Except when Marianne Kusuma's team sequenced Ma'anyan genomes in 2015, they found something nobody expected, a distinct high-frequency genetic component that does not exist in Malagasy DNA at all, not diluted, not present in trace amounts, absent. The people whose words the Malagasy speak are not the people whose blood they carry. So every major population had failed the test. Every seafaring empire, every island chain, every culture built for open ocean crossing had been ruled out one by one. What remained was not a nation, not an empire, not a famous port city. The genetic search narrowed down to a single river system on the southeastern coast of Borneo, the Barito River Basin, a stretch of water where rainforest meets the sea, and nothing about it looks like the source of a civilization 8,000 kilometers away. The FST distance, a measure of how genetically separated two populations are, dropped below 0.02 between this region and the Asian ancestry found in Malagasy DNA today. That number is close to statistical noise. It meant the two populations were Genetically, almost the same population. The match is the Banjar people of southeastern Borneo. Brucado's 2016 study found the highest genetic similarity scores and the tightest shared DNA segments between the Banjar and Malagasy Asian ancestry of any population tested, and Pierron's 2017 genome survey confirmed it independently. But the Banjar are not an ancient, isolated tribe the way the Ma'anyan are. They formed from a Malay trading post that operated in the Barito River region during the Srivijaya era, a place where Malay merchants intermarried with local Ma'anyan and Ngaju families. That is the piece that resolves the puzzle from Block 6. The language came from the Ma'anyan. The DNA came from the Banjar, a population built by trade itself. The Malagasy do not descend from a tribe. They descend from a trading post. But naming the place only answers where. It does not answer how many people it actually took to fill an island now home to 30 million. Cox's 2012 mitochondrial study ran coalescent simulations, computer models that test different founding population sizes against real genetic diversity until the numbers line up, and the result was almost impossible to accept at first. The maternal founding population of Madagascar was approximately 30 women. Not 30,000, 30. Of those 30, roughly 28 were Indonesian and 2 were African, a ratio of about 93-7. Cox himself noted that a typical Indonesian trading vessel of that era could carry around 500 passengers, which means this was not even a full ship. It was a fraction of one. Every Malagasy person alive today carries a maternal mitochondrial marker called the Malagasy motif, a genetic signature that formed after arrival and exists nowhere else on Earth, not even in Borneo. Roughly 1 in 4 Malagasy women carries it. That marker is the fingerprint of a single founding event, not a wave of settlers arriving over generations, but something closer to one voyage, compressed into one moment in time. 30 million people, standing on the 4th largest island on the planet. Every one of them tracing back through their mothers to somewhere around 30 women on what may have been a single boat, blown across an ocean nobody meant to cross. That single boat left no logbook, no wreck, nothing written down. So the confirmation had to come from something other than DNA. It came from dirt. In 2016, a team led by Alison Crowther published an archaeobotanical study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, examining plant remains from the earliest known settlements on Madagascar, sites dated to between the 8th and 10th centuries. The crops recovered were not African. Rice, mung bean, Asian cotton, banana, taro, all Southeast Asian cultivars, made up between 70 and 100% of the plant remains at nearly every site tested. Not a trace of native African agriculture. On an island 400 kilometers from Africa, the first farmers were growing crops from 8,000 kilometers away. The outrigger canoe tells the same story, a distinctly Austronesian design found nowhere on the African mainland, and so does the valiha, a bamboo tube instrument nearly identical to one still played in Borneo today. Genetics, said Borneo. The dirt agreed. Once the founders arrived, Madagascar itself started rewriting their genome. In 2018, Denis Pierron's team analyzed local ancestry across 700 Malagasy genomes and found something strange sitting on chromosome 1. Genome-wide, the average Malagasy person carries roughly 50 to 60% African ancestry. But at one specific gene, called ACR1, that number jumps past 90%. Even in highland populations, where the rest of the genome leans 60 to 70% Asian. ACR1 controls the Duffy blood group, and the African version of it blocks the malaria parasite Plasmodium vivax from entering red blood cells. Researchers calculated the selection coefficient at over 0.2, meaning a carrier had roughly 20% more surviving children than someone without it. In human genetics, 0.01 already counts as strong selection. This was 20 times that. Malaria did not just favor a gene. It reshaped an entire chromosome. None of this stayed in the past. It is sitting in blood types and family trees on the island right now. In every Malagasy child born resistant to a parasite their Asian ancestors never had to face. And it says something bigger than one island's history. Every population on Earth carries a bottleneck like this one, somewhere back in its family tree. A moment when the group that made it through was smaller than anyone would guess. Most of those moments left no trace anyone could find. This one did, preserved in mitochondria, in crop remains, in a single overworked gene on chromosome 1. Scientists set out to compare Malagasy DNA against every population across 2 continents. In the end, the closest match wasn't a tribe, a nation, or an empire. It was a river, a handful of mothers, and one voyage that was never supposed to make it this far.